Welcome on behalf of the Honorable Mayor Ras J. Baraka and the great city of Newark. My name is Carmelo Garcia, Deputy Mayor, Director of Economic and Housing Development. And the purpose of this press conference today is to announce through our partnership the release of RPA's Upgrading to World-Class, the Future of the Region's Airports Revisited. This report is being released as a supplemental document to RPA's fourth regional plan. Most of what the mayor has envisioned and championed is to ensure that we focus on a world-class destination city. The most important being that of capacity, ensuring that, of course, we have our infrastructure, which is a natural resource, and that we continue to build upon it and improve, as well as accessibility. So we are excited to partner with RPA to make this major announcement, whereas it will create a Northeast Rail Corridor, Terminal Head House, create an additional runway to serve up to 69 million annual air passengers by 2060, building a new midfield concourse with secure air train connection to the NEC Head House. Now remember, this is just a plan. So it's imperative to always note that in the great work that they're doing in helping the city of Newark look at the opportunities with respect to a aerotropolis down in the South Ward and with the Newark Airport. So we are excited to ask the Regional Planning Association President, Tom Wright, to join us.
Thanks so much. Thank you for that introduction, and thanks everybody for being here this afternoon, to talk about the release of this report. I want to thank the City of Newark and Mayor Baraka and the Council, and really kind of talk about how much we look forward to working with members of the community here in Newark to make Newark Airport everything it can be for the businesses and the neighborhoods, really a kind of growing economic powerhouse. I also want to thank my staff at RPA, my colleagues, Danny Simons, Kate Slevin, and Rich Barone, who was the primary author of this work, for the enormous work that they've done getting us here today. In a broad sense, I'll say Regional Plan Association has a history of working with, planning, thinking about the the airports of this region, really as long as there have been airports in this region. Going back to the last century, we led efforts to try to make sure that the Port Authority would be in control of the airports, because we didn't want to see kind of a bi-state competition with New York City controlling some and New Jersey controlling others in what we thought would be a self-defeating competition between the two states, but rather to have a metropolitan air travel system. We also led efforts to stop the development of other additional airports in this region, because we saw Newark and Kennedy and LaGuardia and the existing infrastructure that we had as being sufficient a generation ago to handle the growth needs of the tri-state metropolitan region. Today, we're here to talk about this new report and the vision that it lays out, because we see the need for new capacity at our airports as one of the critical issues facing the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut metropolitan region. 6 years ago, we put out an earlier report that laid out a long-term vision for the airports, and we talked about improving the customer experience at the airports. We couldn't have airports that the vice president at the time famously referred to as third world. We needed better access to our airports. We had to have transit links to our airports so that people could get to and from them. And we needed more capacity at the airports, which eventually means more gates, being able to fly larger planes, and yes, new runways. What we've seen in the subsequent years since we put out that report was some progress made on the customer experience, and we're building new terminals here and in New York, and we're starting to see real investments made in those kinds of areas. We've seen the plans, especially for the path extension out to Newark Airport, start to move forward, and at the Port Authority, both that and the LaGuardia Air Train have been moving forward, and we're pleased to see some progress in those areas, and we want to keep pushing on that. But on that third fundamental issue about adding new capacity to the airports to build them into the kind of economic powerhouse that we should have, we haven't seen enough progress, really, or really much at all. Newark Airport should be the capacity and should be doing for this metropolitan region what Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport is doing. And that's what we're talking about in terms of the employment, the economic output, what it produces for us. And so we want to see the business, the civic, the public sector come together. We want to see these decisions made. And what we're doing is laying out a vision that we think is very provocative and we hope compelling for people. But what this does is shows that it can be done, that we do have a blueprint for getting there. And so we want to try and make these investments and start to really upgrade these. None of this, nothing that we can do at RPA, we're just a private, nonprofit, regional planning organization. None of the things that we ever talk about ever happen without strong leadership at the public sector side. And one of the things that's so inspiring for us is that Newark really does have leaders today who are pushing forward and want to see these kinds of opportunities happen and want to see them done in an inclusive way so that everybody benefits. So thank you so much. We'd be happy to answer questions from the media or anyone else afterwards. But that's really what I wanted to say to kind of release this report today. And I'm happy to turn this over, I think, to Councilman James now. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Good afternoon. This project is so important to the South Ward. As you know, the airport is our biggest economic driver in that area. I am pleased to have been working with the RPA and the mayor driving redevelopment in the South Ward. Currently, we have a planned PATH train extension, a new station at the airport. This project before you actually would bring that station, bring the airport closer to that station to involve more community access. Right now, from the street, you cannot walk to Newark Airport. This project with the new station would allow individuals to be dropped off at the street level and engage in various forms of transportation, whether they're taking New Jersey Transit, north and south, whether they're actually walking into the PATH train station, which would allow them access all the way over to Lower Manhattan, or actually going to the airport, which right now would be linked by the monorail system. So I am pleased for this to go forward. This would not go forward without the mayor and his great vision. Be followed now by Honorable Mayor Ras Baraka. Thank you.
I thought it was some airline folks here, but I just want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. Obviously, I want to thank RPA for the work that they do, which is essential to research and data and information that you have regarding transportation infrastructure in this region is invaluable. As a matter of fact, we take a lot of cues from the reports that are put out, and this addendum to it overlays right on top of the things that we're trying to do right here in the city of Newark. We believe that the airport being, having the capacity that it has, and the seaport being the second largest seaport in the nation, needs to drive the economy more than it already is. It needs to have a greater impact on the population of this community. It needs to uplift the businesses in this area. And I think what you said was right on the mark. How Atlanta's airport is to that region is absolutely what Newark Airport should be to this region. What is missing is the investment, the kind of investment in the infrastructure, in the transportation infrastructure that we need. The state government here in New Jersey, state government in New York, federal governments underinvesting in infrastructure is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. It's not only a mistake because some of the things are very, very old, but it's a mistake because it underutilizes the capacity of the transportation infrastructure that we have in this community. If they invested more in the airport, we would be able to see what's being presented to us today, and would have an awesome impact, not just on the regional economy, but in Newark specifically. More residents getting employed, more opportunities for residents to have access to the airport, raising the economy here in the city of Newark, which in turn raised the economy in the state of New Jersey, making it possible to create a corridor of transportation, not just in Newark, but New York, LaGuardia, Kennedy, all those airports. There needs to be connectivity between those airports, but it also needs to be more accessible to the residents in this region. It seems to me that everybody else around the world has it, and we've kind of missed the mark on that where, you know, we have to invest more in our infrastructure. In fact, the infrastructure here is probably a lot more cumbersome and a lot more expensive as opposed to other places where it's cheap and more efficient. We have to work to get to that place, and that takes a lot more investment. And we praise Port Authority for what their report put out, adding what the councilman said, a train that, you know, comes through Newark, stops in Newark and goes to the airport, but that's not enough. We need a lot more investment, and I think RPA has hit the nail on the head, and we need to do what we can to make sure that the things that are written, the plans, the assessments, the dreams, I should say, are able to come into reality, not just for the residents of the 300,000 residents of the city, but the millions of people that live up and down the Northeast Corridor that use and have access to probably one of the best airports, in my mind, in this region. So, thank you.
So we'll open it up. Mayor will take questions. And Tom? Yes.
Any idea what the price tag on this will be?
Actually, and I was going to say, I'd like to invite my colleague, Rich Barone, our Vice President for Transportation, to come up and answer any specific questions like that. It's okay. Here, Rich.
Well, hi, I'm Rich Barone, Vice President for Transportation, Regional Plan Association. These are very high-level estimates with a degree of error. We estimated that Newark Airport would cost to redo the entire airport, airfield, groundside, new terminals, something like $28 billion. So about $750 million annually over a 40-year period, because we envision a 30, 40-year design, transformation phasing of the airport.
So how much would it cost?
It would cost, the total we estimated in today's dollars, $28 billion, but over about translates about $750 million a year over 40 years.
What precisely are you calling for at Newark? Can you just walk us through it a little bit, Rich?
Sure, Dana. So we're calling for a few things. As Tom mentioned, it's really important, it's critical that we look at a third runway. But to get to a third runway, we need to actually move things around a lot at the airport in order to make it fit and to make it work, to get the greatest amount of capacity. We anticipate with the third runway we could actually increase capacity by something like 44%, which is substantial. In order to do that, though, we're shifting what is currently the central terminal area, over and breaking actually into two pieces. We're taking one piece, which is the entrance to the airport, where you come in for security, and where you drive in, you pick up, drop off, checking your baggage, pick up your baggage, to the Northeast Corridor, and building a Northeast Corridor head house. And we're taking where the gates are, and we're putting them out in between the runways in the midfield. We call that the midfield concourse, connecting them by an air train. So there's the NEC terminal, there's the midfield concourse, and then the new runway. And then there's also, I guess, a fourth piece, which would be expanding the airport a little bit further to the south to create more space for the runway into a commercial area, but also to create additional cargo space, because it is a major cargo airport in Newark.
Is that land that the Port Authority already owns, the land you're talking about expanding south?
No, that land is actually in Elizabeth. So it's a commercial area in Elizabeth between the existing railroad tracks and the airport.
Mention the path extension.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, one other thing I should mention is the path extension, which we've been pushing for years to extend to the existing rail link station. This would also include extending a little bit further south, another half a mile to the new rail terminal.
How do you envision this being funded?
Well,
take a shot?
well, let me, partially, part of it is the airports currently make an enormous amount of profit for the Port Authority, and under the port's structure, it's kind of subsidizing lots of operations, important ones. As part of the 4th Regional Plan that we put out last fall, we talked about making reforms at the Port Authority, which are urgently needed, and then also looking to make the different departments of the Port Authority more self-sustaining. Because if the airports, right now, essentially, it's a kind of financial model that the airports and the Trans-Hudson crossings really subsidize a lot of other critical operations. So in some ways, it's not just about paying for these investments itself, but it's about the Port Authority figuring out how to make its seaports profitable the way they are in other parts of the world. How potentially to capture some of the value created by the PATH system itself and use that to pay for operations of the PATH system. And other things, all of which would free up funding and capacity at the Port Authority to make these kinds of investments. So there's a lot that needs to be done overall with the agency before you just start to talk about specifically how you would do this.
And is the agency doing that, now to accomplish what you're
No.
talking about?
Well, we're starting to see the Port Authority. Look, there's a lot of debate right now in both Trenton and Albany about reform at the Port Authority, and I think that there are opportunities to start to see that. And Rich just whispered in my ear. Also, look, one of the clear issues that we have is the passenger facility charge, which is a surcharge on travelers, which is set nationally at the same level across the country by Congress. And right now, kind of essentially charging the same low rate for somebody flying in and out of this region as other parts of the country really doesn't make sense. And so we'd like to see Congress raise that PFC potential so that we would have a very good and stable funding source there that would help pay for it.
What happened to Newark that seems to be this disconnect, as Councilman James spoke about, where you have the South, where you have the city, and there's almost no connection to this multi-billion-dollar operation going to Newark Liberty?
Well, that's a few decades old discussion. When the airport was built, obviously they envisioned building it without connecting it to the South Forward. So it was a mistake then, it's a mistake now, and I think that people are beginning to see the error of that, at least to the extent that they put it in a capital plan. Whether they fund it, I mean, and get it off the ground is a whole nother discussion about, you know, what they think is a priority. Is that more important than remodeling a bus station in New York, Manhattan, or the other kind of things? And I think fundamentally, investing in itself should be the most important thing. And I think that's what is being said here, that there are opportunities for the Port Authority to invest in its own infrastructure that would help it save money, become more efficient, and begin to reprioritize some of their, you know, their investments and put it towards allowing the Port Authority, the runways, the airport, the seaport to be more profitable for them, but at the same time, more accessible to the community.
Yes. You talked about an increase in capacity, Mr. Barone, I think 44% or so. In terms of real dollars, is there an estimate as to, if you go through all this and all this is done, how much more economic would it mean to Newark and to the region?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe there's a lot more work needs to be done on that. It would mean, you know, billions of additional dollars and thousands of additional jobs, but we haven't done a complete economic analysis of what it would actually bear out to be.
If the overall recommendation is about $50 billion and 25 to 30 billion for Newark specifically, can you talk to a little bit about how Newark Airport, how the airports would be prioritized, as far as where money goes and when it goes to specific airports, and then for Newark specifically, if the overall time frame is 30 to 40 years, how long would Newark's project specifically take if it was fully funded?
Sure. The way we prioritize it is that JFK would likely go first in the next 20 years, and that's where the initial runway would be built. Then after that, we would start, and really starting today, we have to start getting the pieces together for Newark. I mean, that's something that's going to take a long time because it's so complicated. It's by far the more complicated of the two in order to put together, because you're talking about rearranging the whole airport. And we don't envision, though, the runway coming in because of capacity, our demand estimates, towards the end of the 30, 40-year period. So probably between 30 and 40 years, you would see the runway come online. There's a couple reasons for that. I mean, one reason is that, again, what our demand estimates say, and there's also the desire now to get Terminal A off the ground and construct it. And Terminal A, obviously, where it's being put today, is going to be in the way for the runway in the future. So we need to get around 30 years out of that structure before it's moved and we build the runway where it's, you know, finish building the runway out where it's at today. So I think it's those two things. So the priority is, you know, and JFK is going to hit its, you know, threshold sooner than Newark as far as capacity.
In the report, it mentions that Newark Airport is capped at 81 flights per hour by the FAA. At the end of this project, how many flights per hour could conceivably land and take off from Newark?
Okay. Well, currently the FAA has changed the caps at Newark. It's now what they call level 2, so there's no real hard cap, but they have to approve the number of operations per hour. That's one of the reasons why we're seeing delays creep up at Newark, and that was done, again, to utilize slots that weren't being used during the peak. and to get a little more access and competition at the airport. Yeah, you would increase, again, you would increase it up to about 100 MAP, close to, a little over 100 MAP, million annual passengers. Sorry, million annual passengers, 100 operations, over 100 operations per hour you'd be able to get out of the airport. I can get you the exact figure.
The one thing I'd say about that is that there's this relationship between the number of operations and the delays. And if you're willing to handle the kinds of delays that we have, you'll see more, you can get more operations. What we're trying to do is both increase operations but reduce delays, because we think it's absolutely vital that the airports in this region really function the way they do around the rest of the country. And there's a trade-off between those two. And to some degree, if you want to try and get as much capacity as you can out, you're just going to have to live with greater delays. We've kind of made a judgment call about increasing capacity and reducing delays at the same time. And again, there'll be a trade-off between those that planners will have to figure out going forward.
Yeah, we're aiming for a 10-minute delay, essentially on average, which is a national average, compared to today where it's roughly 15 minutes or more.
Follow-up question. The brewery property, what happens to that? Obviously, it's a big employer in Newark. What happens to the brewery? What happens to those jobs?
Well, again, the brewery, and this is, to be clear, this is a concept. This is a long-term plan. I think we envision at the end of this, we want to maintain the brewery, as it's an icon for Newark. It's the structure itself. We envision, though, probably the end of it, that the use of the brewery would probably change in the next 30 or 40 years.
But it could be employed, other people could be working there in
Yes.
hospitality or other services.
Yep.
And a follow-up question for the mayor. Maybe you could speak a little bit about what this means for the Dayton community. Right now, the railroad has sort of been a moat as far as getting people conveniently over to the airport for jobs. What do you see as this doing economically for that community?
Well, obviously, I think it is going to have an incredible kind of impact on that neighborhood. Obviously, if people can get to the airport quicker, it would allow people to get to jobs where the jobs are growing faster, but also creates a community, a neighborhood. You not only just for Newark, but to the cities outside of Newark, whether you're talking about Elizabeth or Bayonne or those other cities where they could park and ride and do other kinds of things right there if a train actually stopped there in that area. It adds to the development, economic development and social improvement in that community right away. It connects to a part of the city that's already one of the highest wage earners in the city that we have. It connects to that area, so it'll help us fill in a lot of those houses that have been affected by the deep foreclosure in this country. So it repairs a historic neighborhood, the Weequahic section. It revitalizes and redevelops the Dayton Street community. It attaches itself to the airport, and it gives opportunity to thousands of Newarkers to have direct access to the jobs that are growing there.
Yeah, just to follow up on that quickly, we do envision it actually being like a front door to the community. So not only are you talking about getting access to the intermodal facilities, so like the idea is that it would be a transit facility. You'd have PATH, you'd have New Jersey Transit, high-speed rail, bus service out of there as well. But also people can walk then to the airport. So it really would open up the entire area to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor.